Life today is filled with abstraction after abstraction, concepts that we need to understand and function. To help with these abstractions, we use language such as metaphors as a means for understanding, but metaphors aren't just a linguistic flourish. Technology in particular uses metaphors as a framework for the creation, implementation, and usage of new objects and systems. This might be as simple as building an understanding of how a mouse works based on our experience of using a finger to point, or as complex as understanding how a programming language builds software that can run on a computer or connect us with others across the globe based on metaphors of a spider's web. Conceptual metaphor theory, as outlined by George Lakoff and Mark Johnson in the book Metaphors We Live By, outlined how the metaphors are surprisingly consistent, exposing pre-linguistic concepts. For example, using time is money, therefore we can both give our time and save time for something, while fretting whether something might be worth our time. Mark Johnson later expanded on this work in the book The Body and the Mind, explaining how we understand the abstract in terms of our bodily experiences. Because we have the experience of learning how to balance as we learned to stand and walk, we are able to recognize visual balance, and from that we can conceptualize psychological balance and judicial balance. George Lakoff has shown through brain scans that these metaphors aren't just linguistic. The same areas of the brain light up when using words like balance in all levels of usage. In our mind, we are literally using the basic concept as our means of understanding the abstract. How then are metaphors used to describe and shape educational technology? In this video, I will look at this question on 3 different levels. For students, a number of metaphors are used to describe their relationship to technology. One example, technology is often seen as both a necessity and an addiction. Students recognize the utility and freedom offered through technological skills while simultaneously associating it with negative activities such as drugs and gambling. This metaphor of addiction is one often seen in casual conversation, but psychologist Todd Essig argues that it has no basis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders 5th edition, the DSM-V. In the case of behaviors around technology, behavioral addiction can instead be seen as illustrative of the rich lives that students live in both cyberspace and meat space, with challenges faced in one space causing compensative behaviors in the other. That one is a technological simulation of the other does not make the simulation any less meaningful for those participating. Another metaphor used to describe this continuity of experience is that of a cyborg, a figure representing blurred boundaries, frayed identities, and contradictory elements incorporated into one fluid, permeable figure. This metaphor also highlights how social media and other online experiences blur lines about what is past and present, such as a timeline, boundaries between intimacies and acquaintances, the difference in presentation between an actual and idealized self, and the lines between our public and private selves. Metaphors are also a tool used in pedagogy to assist students with learning new technology. For older adults, researchers compared standard Gmail interfaces with a custom interface designed to use concrete visual metaphors, such as an image of a mailbox to indicate the inbox. While study participants who had never used email did not show higher task effectiveness, they felt a greater sense of agency, describing more comfort and satisfaction, as well as showing a higher intention to use technology again. In an elementary classroom, students introduced to creating hypertext documents, similar to creating a wiki, demonstrated different levels of complexity in their creations depending on the metaphors used to introduce the concept. Students using the book metaphor were more likely to create mostly sequential documents, as compared with students using a city metaphor who were more likely to create non-linear links and demonstrated a statistically significant higher percentage of meaningful links. Another study experimenting with applying the metaphor of mathematics is a language, emphasizing the need for group language practice. After assigning students to collaborative work, including creating a group wiki and using an online system called Wimba that included breakout rooms for group work, the researchers found positive outcomes and received positive student feedback. The implementation of technology by teachers is another area filled with metaphor usage, and the metaphors they use demonstrate their relationship with proposed technology. For example, journey metaphors are sometimes used to describe a lengthy process for implementation, as well as differing opinions on which route to follow. In cases of more outright conflict, teachers may use military metaphors, such as talking about the battles between entrenched rank and file versus the chain of command. These metaphors impact the relationship between users and leaders of implementation efforts, and can also be used to better understand the feelings of those involved. In a study of 237 student teachers in Turkey, most described technology in 4 broad categories, including categories related to development, such as talking about it in terms of humans, babies, trees, or science. as facilitation, talking about it in terms of cars, medicine, servants, or candles, as a vital necessity such as water, food, bread, or blood, or power, talking about it in terms of weapons, brains, money, or gold. A small subset, however, of the student teachers described technology as a kind of threat, describing it as a virus, cigarettes, fire, drug, indicating pessimism and perhaps opposition to implementation. In another example, when metaphoric personification is used in describing computer systems, people start to interact with computers differently in 3 areas, attributing socialness, control, and intelligence to their devices. In talking to Siri, we may attribute a certain amount of human agency, allowing us to relate more easily, but we may also start to expect a machine to assume a social role that it isn't intended to fill. We may shift from asking questions of what a machine can do to asking questions of what a machine will do. Metaphors are also important in the larger picture. The abstraction of technology means that as it develops, metaphors give us a means to contextualize and understand how new technology fits within our lives and within markets and legal frameworks. Researcher Maria Lind argues that metaphors are tools of power, through which various actors are able to shape the discussion to their own advantage. The metaphor, cloud computing is a utility, is intended to convey the concept that this technology is reliable, unobtrusive, and unvarying. This metaphor implies several entailments, including that technology requires some degree of regulation and the inclusion of a variety of services for users. The metaphor might also provide a foundation for arguing that cloud computing should be centralized and standardized, regardless of the impact to individual users' needs, and questions about whether access to internet bandwidth should be charged as a flat rate or on a usage basis, as with electricity and water, come to mind. Theoreticians question the implication of bringing these metaphors to a technical life. To get abstract for a moment, as a society, we are constructing a reality both in terms of subjective concepts and then by literally building machines from our metaphoric foundations. Let us return briefly to the cyborg metaphor, which envisions each person with a life blended across cyberspace and meat space. In expanding our idea of a human self to include a self on the internet, we give rise to both NSA surveillance and the communal knowledge building of Wikipedia. Postmodern theorist Jean Baudrillard warned of a modern blending of physical reality with simulated reality into what he termed hyperreality. Indeed, in a world of virtual and augmented realities, the line between the simulation and the idea of the original thing, if such a thing ever even existed, becomes increasingly blurred. That said, the utility of metaphor on my level is primarily one of awareness. By recognizing the role that our language uses in bridging from our experiences and conceptual schema to new technology, we can more deliberately frame new concepts. In the classroom, I can think carefully about how my own metaphors impact whether and to what degree students embrace technology they might use now and when traveling. By recognizing that students often view their lives in cyborg terms, discussion of their social media abroad is shifted to discussion not of whether, but of degree and of impact. In working with new technological systems, I can think about how the language used to discuss it might show each person's stances on the technology, and how my language can subtly shift that tone. And lastly, I can consider how my perspective on new technology, system implementations, and potential legislation are shaped by the language being used so as to build a deeper and richer understanding of the issues and become an educated participant in the conversation of what is to come. Through an understanding of metaphor usage, I can both shed light on our current practices and build a better foundation for the educational technology of tomorrow.